Hello, my name is Russell Mayer. I'm going to take the next few minutes and kind of walk you through the XBean table custom control. The custom control is designed to allow you to quickly add a dynamic table to an X page. The table itself is all operated on, or all of its operations are provided via a managed bean in your application. Since it's done through a managed bean, it's very quick because all the operations are done in memory. Also, since it's done in the managed bean, none of the there's no read-write activity unless the user actually goes to save the document. And then finally, the way it's designed, it's all done server-side through the bean and server-side, partial refreshes. This control should work on any client, mobile, notes client, browser that can display whatever your X pages are. So if you do download the application, you'll find there's a sample set of X pages in it. Every one of those X pages has a navigator across the top just for demo purposes. I'm going to start here in the View User Documents page and open up User Doc. The User Doc is a sample that shows the custom control in action. It works like users want it to work, which is they want to be able to add as many rows as they can, as they want to. They want to be able to delete rows. They want to be able to fill out fields. For developers, this is all happening very quickly because it is done in memory. There's no I/O going on the hard drive. In addition, if the users do something like, they want to delete the last row, well, for developers, we want to make sure that they always have at least one row in the table, so the bean handles that part too. If they do try to save the table as final, they're given validation messages indicating that they need to provide values. If they save it as draft, then of course all the changes that they've done will be accepted even if they haven't completed all the questions. So if we save as draft here, reopen it, then we'll look here and say, sure enough, it's life is good. Again, because everything's done through a managed bean and nothing is actually committed to the document until it's saved, if they do go through and they manipulate the table, 50 times, add a bunch of rows, change data, whatever, if they go back and they just open up the document again, the table will go back to the way it was originally. So it works the way developers want it to work. It's all done in memory. It works on multiple clients. It's all done on server side. The users, they like it because they can do whatever kind of data changes that they need by adding as many rows as they want. Uh, as far as the table configuration goes, the headers for each column are configurable. The type of field in each column is configurable, so you can have a radio button, a combo box, you can have check boxes, you can have regular text fields. In addition to that, for the multi-valued fields, you have the ability to decide or configure what the choices are for each of those fields. And then in the configuration, you also have the ability to decide whether or not a particular field is required. So if I go up here and look at the view configurations listing, I can go to this configuration, which is the one that's currently being used. And let's just say I make a quick change. So how about we change this? How many business/personal trips do you take each year? And then because we read all this, pretty much anything we do to this code is read as HTML. So even if we decide to make it really large and really different colors, we can end up with some really crazy headers. But the point here is that the configuration is all done through this document, and we'll talk in more detail here at the end once we talk about installation. But so if I've changed the configuration, if I go back to View User Documents and I open up the document, then the configuration, the bean looks at the configuration fresh every time you open the document, and it automatically makes it updatable. So easy to use for users, configurable by any end user, and it operates quickly on any client. Okay, next we'll talk about how to set this up in your own application. There's a couple different ways to do this. The easiest way is to just make a copy of XBean table NSF, give it a new file name, and then the control is in there. You can just use the custom control because all the pieces and parts are in there. But what I'll do is I'll walk you through how to put this into a brand new application, and that way you'll get to see all the elements that you have to copy, and then see how to do the initial configuration, and then how to drop it into your first X page. It's pretty straightforward. What we'll do is here we'll make a brand new application. We'll call this new DB and we'll let it do its thing. Um, what I would recommend, and we still might have a little problem with, what I've noticed is copying and pasting all these elements sometimes requires a restart of Designer, but occasionally you can get away with just doing it this way. So I'd recommend starting from the bottom. You will need the style sheets. So I'm going to copy the style sheets and we'll put those right in there. You will also need all of the images. So the images are pretty straightforward. We'll copy those. We'll paste those in. Moving up the list, we are going to need to use these three Java design elements. The Java design elements are actually where all the magic exists. These represent a managed bean that does all of the table operations. The code is all fully commented, and there's Java.doc API included in the download. So if you actually wanted to take a look at the code, it's all there. I put it together as sort of a teaching application, so it's pretty well documented, so that you can get a feel for how it got put together. But that's where the code goes. You will need all of the custom controls in the application, so we'll copy those. We'll put those in here. We will copy those again. Copy, paste. The last two things we need will be the X pages and a view. So as far as X pages goes, the only two X pages you really need to have are the configurations view X page and the table configuration X page. The view configurations view X page gives you access to create new configurations, and the table configuration X page actually represents a table configuration. So we'll go through that. We'll paste those in. And the final element that you need to copy from the original database or the sample database is the configurations view. If I go into the configurations view and paste that in. So you need to copy those design elements into your application. The next step is to configure the managed bean. So you configure the managed bean actually in the faces config XML file. In the sample database, I already put a sample file. You can actually just go in and copy the managed bean. Matter of fact, what I would do is I would just copy the whole doggone thing, put that on your clipboard, and then you can go into your application, go to Package Explorer, open up your NSF, look for your faces config file, and down here in web content, webinf, faces config. If your faces config looks like this, then I would say just replace the whole thing and save it. If your faces config already has or has any information in here that's auto-built, then you would only want to drop in the managed bean configuration part. And the managed bean configuration part basically says, hey, here's the name of the bean, so when we go to call it, that's what we'll refer to it by, and here's where the class actually is, which those again refer to those Java design elements where the code exists. So that's the configuration that you need. You copy those design elements, you configure the managed bean through the faces config. I would also recommend doing a couple other things, especially if you're doing a brand new application. The first thing is I would go into your X pages application properties, and just for chuckles, I would turn on do the runtime X page thing so you can see, just in case there is a problem. It's a little easier to find out what the problem is. And secondly, I would disable client validation, because if you do client-side validation, then they're going to keep getting prompted every time they go to save the table. But the thing is actually designed to work with server-side validation. So we're going to save those properties. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go in here and change the ACL to make sure that people can actually preview. So I'm doing this locally, so instead of letting it bark at me that I've got to have an entry for anonymous, I'm just going to set default to manager. Of course, in your application, you'll set your ACL appropriately. The one last thing is I'm doing this on my workstation, so I already trust myself, but you will probably want to sign your application. So if you right click on your application, you can choose application, sign design. It will go through and actually sign all the design elements for you, and that way all this code that you copied in from the demo database will actually be authorized to run uh, in your environment. So once you have everything set, the only thing you need to do after that point is you need to make a configuration document, and then you need to use the control. So I recommend to make a table configuration. I would say preview the configurations view X page. It'll pop up. You can add a brand new configuration. The configuration allows you to, well, requires you to have a unique table lookup key. You will use this key later on when you use the custom control, and then you decide, well, how many columns do I want in my table? And essentially, you go through here and you say, all right, well, I'd like this to be column label number 1, and we want it to be Rust types take 2. We want it to be bold, we want it to be underlined, we want it to be 14 points, and we'd like it to be centered, and just for chuckles, I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. And the first thing is we'll say that that's a text field, and yes, it is required. And then for the second column, we'll paste in and we'll just say this is column label number 2. We'll say that this is a radio field, and it has 3 choices, yes, no, and maybe, and it is also required. And then finally, we will do column label number 3, and we'll say that that's a checkbox, and we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll require that as well. So that's the whole thing for the configuration document. You just need to give a key value, decide how many columns you want, and for each column decide what the header is going to be, what kind of a field is it, whether or not it's required, and then if it's a radio, combo box, or checkbox, then you would want to give it a set of choices. So we'll save that configuration. So now we have a configuration. In order to actually use the control, you got to go back into Designer. We'll make a brand new X page. And add a data source. And then finally, adding the custom control itself. So I'm going to go over here and add in the table being dynamic table control. I'm going to drop that in. Now, I'm going to just pause right here. What I've noticed is sometimes after copying all the elements in, I drop the control in there and it's invisible. I've tried doing project clean, and sometimes that works, but what always works is shutting down Designer and reopening it, and then you will see the custom control. It still drops in there, it just doesn't show up. But if you run into that, just restart Designer and you should see it again. Once you drop the control in, all you have to do is set 2 settings. Number 1, you have to tell it what page you're going to go to when the user actually submits the table document. And then number 2, you have to use the table key or identify the table key. So in this case, we're going to use new table key because that's the value of the key for our configuration document. I'm going to save this and just double check that stuff took. This is another thing that I've noticed. If you save it, it just kind of seems to blank that out. But in the control itself, it actually has the data. I'm not sure why it's doing that. But in the end, that's all you need to do is just drop it in there. If I preview this X page now, my control basically works. And if I try to save it as final, everything's going to say, ha ha ha, you've got to do this thing. If I try to save it as draft, I'm going to end up back at this new table key because that's what I told it to do. If I do go back and change the I change the configuration and save it, then I should be able to go back to the configuration document. We'll just go back into your X page here. We'll reopen it from scratch, and here's the new information. So, not a real pretty table, but that's all it takes. So, way back over here in the configuration, the custom control, just drop it in. Make sure you have a data source on your X page. Tell it what key value represents the configuration, and then pick an X page to go to after you get saved, and life's good. That's it.